It's time to take a new approach to finding true fulfillment in your career, health, and state of mind through insightful conversations with those who have found their professional and personal passions while achieving balance. Whether it's entrepreneurs, athletes, or healthcare professionals, we bring you real people, real growth right here on the Boost Podcast. Now, here's your host, Elena Lipson.
Hey Boost Squad, and welcome to episode 30. Elena Lipson here, and I am so fired up to introduce today's featured guest, Carrie Rich. Carrie, are you ready to join the Boost Squad?
I am. Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Mosaic Growth Partners. Mosaic Growth Partners provides growth strategy consulting to entrepreneurs and organizations in the healthcare and older adult baby boomer market. They can help you bring a new product or service to market, identify and engage new customers and partners, or grow your market share. They also provide coaching and training. For more information, go to mosaicgrowth.com. That's mosaicgrowth.com. Now back to today's featured guest.
So Carrie is the CEO and co-founder of the Global Good Fund, which is built by and for social entrepreneurs. It was created in 2012 when Carrie was just 26 years old, based on the belief that growing leaders is the best strategy for solving complex social problems and achieving global good. The Global Good Fund leverages this vision by accelerating the development of high-potential young leaders through financial investment and by harnessing executive insights via a customized leadership development program. In 2017, over 2,400 high-potential entrepreneurs from more than 100 countries applied for one of 12 fellowship positions with the fund. And Carrie wears a number of other hats as well, including published author, mentor in residence at GW University. She's also a part of the faculty at GW and the Amani Institute in Kenya and a board member at several other organizations. Carrie's also won a number of honors, including the 2016 Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, the POLITICO Women Who Rule Award, the Washington Business Journal 40 Under 40, Entrepreneur.com Top 30 Startups to Watch, the Asian Social Innovation CEO of the Year, and others. And the story of how the Global Good Fund came to be is so amazing. I cannot wait to get into it with you today, Carrie. But before that, why don't you just start off by telling us the 3 things that we should know about the Global Good Fund?
Sure. Well, thanks again for this opportunity. I think the first thing about the Global Good Fund that I learned through a process of discovery is that people are looking for ways to share their gifts and a platform for having purpose in their lives. So that it was not obvious to me at the outset of the Global Good Fund. It's something I learned that's applicable to anyone at any spectrum of life, whether you're a multimillionaire or someone like me who's just getting started. That people are looking for ways to apply their skill set to have purpose in the world. And if we can harness people living their full potential and having purpose in their life and life's work, that's one way to grow a business. So that's what the Global Good Fund is all about. The second thing you should definitely know about the Global Good Fund is that while I'm often the face of the organization, this would not be possible without the co-founder and team that's behind the Global Good Fund. So there's a full-time staff and a wonderful board of advisors and directors and young executives who support the growth of the Global Good Fund and really help coach and mentor me. So I probably have more mentors than anyone in our community, and that's a reflection of wanting to be better and be the best that I can be and grow the Global Good Fund in a meaningful way. And then I think the last thing is my purpose personally is how do you pay it back by really paying it forward and helping other people live their full potential. That's what the Global Good Fund is all about. Might this be a good opportunity to share a bit about how the Global Good Fund came to be?
Yeah, I think that would be great. The story is great. You guys are going to love hearing this.
So Global Good Fund is actually modeled on my relationship with my mentor, whose name is Knox Singleton. At the time, Knox was and still is the CEO of a large healthcare organization called Innova in Virginia. And I went to Knox one day when I was 25 years old, and I had been working for him, and he had been really investing in me heavily. He had been accelerating my personal career development and personal leadership development much faster than it would otherwise have grown by giving me really challenging assignments, putting financial resources and staff behind these responsibilities and mentoring me, sponsoring me, pulling me up. And so one day I went to Knox and I said, you've helped accelerate my career so much more quickly than it would have otherwise grown had you not been mentoring me. What if we could find other young people around the world who are using their lives for social good and are working for companies that do something good for the world, and pair them with people like you who have a lot of experience and put some targeted fund behind that pairing as a catalyst for social good? Imagine what great things could happen for the world. And he looked at me and said, Carrie, would you please get back to doing your job? And I sort of hung my head and I went back to work. And 2 months later, I figured he'd forgotten about the whole conversation. 2 months later, for my 26th birthday, he handed me a card. And inside the card was a check for $100 and a note that said, here's the money I would have spent taking you and your colleagues to lunch for your birthday. Now you can live out this admonition. And he'd written a quote by John Wesley that said something to the effect of, do all the good you can in all the ways you can, by all the people you can, so long as you ever can. And I was quite inspired. My boss gave me some lunch money. That was pretty neat. What can you do, though, with $100? $100, it's very generous, but it doesn't exactly go a long way. So I wrote to 6 organizations that I'd volunteered with in the past and explained to them that my boss gave me $100 and I would like to turn $100 into $1,000 for each of you. What would you do with $1,000 that could have sustainable impact in the communities you serve? I was really inspired by the reactions I got from these organizations. In Haiti, we could sustain 10 families on community agriculture. In Tanzania, we could send 25 women through secondary school. In Anacostia, DC, not far from where I lived, we could dramatically improve the literacy rates in a classroom. So I was all fired up. I sent an email to friends and family. And of course, you need a subject heading when you do that. So I picked Global Good Fund because of the John Wesley quote that my mentor had written in my birthday card. And I said, my boss gave me some lunch money. Here are the 6 organizations we could help. If you'd each donate a little bit, maybe it would add up to $6,000. And I really never dreamed that it would be anything more than a one-time activity. Mm-hmm. And I was ready to hit the send button. And then I realized, my goodness, it's 4 days before Christmas. Probably everyone's super busy. Why would anyone respond to my email? I better add some more names to my distribution. So I went through my Gmail account, and when you type in the letter A, whoever's email address starts with A, auto pop. Yeah, so I added A, and whoever's email address popped up, I hit enter, B, C, D, through the entire alphabet, and took hours. And by the end, there was a good number of emails in the distribution, and hit the send button with everyone in blind copy. And sure enough, my friends started sending in $20, and I was so grateful someone sent in $100. I thought that was incredible. And eventually we raised $6,052, and I sort of brushed my hands and I said, one-time activity, this is wonderful. We'll distribute the money, and that's the end of it. 2 weeks after sending that initial email, I got a message back from someone whose email address I didn't recognize. And it turns out he had been added to the email distribution when I was just auto-populating the email addresses and hitting enter. And he wrote back, it was someone I'd sat next to for 5 minutes a year prior at a conference, and you would have no idea this person had wealth. And he said, first sentence, I'd like to stay anonymous. The second part was, I'd like to send $1 million to the Global Good Fund. Where should I send the check?
Wow.
And of course, I assumed this must be a prank, because who in their right mind would send me a check for $1 million, or anyone a check for $1 million like that? But what if it wasn't a prank? So I wrote back and I said, if this is not a prank, please meet me at this very public location with lots of surveillance cameras at this date and time, because I didn't know if this person was a creep or what. You never know today. So I asked him to meet me in a public place, and he showed up with a bank certified check made out to the Global Good Fund, which did not exist. It was merely the subject heading of an email. And he said, I would like to contribute this money to the Global Good Fund. Let me know what you do with it. And he handed me the check and walked away. And I was standing there shaking with $1 million in hand in a check made out to an organization that didn't exist, having absolutely no idea what to do with that check. And I didn't know, could you deposit? I just had no idea. So the only thing I could think to do was go back to my boss and I flung open his very corporate office door and slammed the check down on his table. And I explained, look what you've done. You gave me this lunch money. I wrote this email, and a relative stranger handed a check for $1 million made out to an organization that doesn't exist. I have no idea what to do, and I need your help. And he responded that he would help under two conditions. The first condition was that at work, I report to him, and at the Global Good Fund, he would support me. And he has stayed true to that to this day. 5 years later, I meet with him every other month for a couple hours to strategize, and he's on the board and has been a wonderful contributor to the Global Good Fund in a variety of ways. And he said the second condition is I will match this $1 million gift personally.
Wow.
I gave new meaning to the expression fell out of your chair. I just could not believe it. I'm still pinching myself to this day. So that's how the Global Good Fund got started. And fast forward, we're on track to receive about 3,000 applications from social entrepreneurs around the globe who are really excited to support in terms of their personal leadership development, with the idea that if we invest in high potential young leaders, they'll in turn grow businesses that positively impact the world.
Wow. So I love this. Your story is really just beyond incredible. I think it illustrates so many people just don't do things because either they don't have a fully baked or even a half baked idea, and they don't really think that they can make an impact. And I love that you weren't even thinking this big, but you were just like, okay, why don't I just see if I can raise some money? And you went through and sort of naively created this Gmail list in not the most efficient way. And there are people that literally, pay tons of money to have lists, and you just created your own, and you kind of hit the jackpot with this guy, that the anonymous donor of $1 million, and then to have a boss that matched it too. I bet most people don't find themselves in the situation where they're sitting there with $2 million and are kind of like, oh crap, now I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this. But that's a great problem to have. And I think you're a great example of just going out there and taking a chance. There wasn't a lot of risk in doing this for you, but it was just something that you really felt strongly about wanting to give back. And then you may have gotten in a little over your head in the beginning, but you've really grown it into something so impressive. And I want to use this as an example for you to really go and take a chance and do something, even if you think you're just doing it on a small scale, because you don't really know where it's going to end up. And Carrie is a great example of that. Carrie, I also want to touch on a couple things that you had mentioned. So you talked about having more mentors in your organization than a lot of other people, and you talked about Knox being a mentor for you when you worked at Innova. And I know a lot of people have trouble finding mentors. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned about how you can establish that relationship with someone in a way that really feels natural and that's good for both of you?
Sure. So most people I've found want to make a difference with their lives. And the challenging part is people have relatively little time, or feel they have relatively little time to make a difference. And so one of the things I try to do is communicate with folks when they are making a difference in my life, so they know that I appreciate what they're doing, and I follow up to let them know that routinely, even when we don't meet, so that I can say, I remember this conversation, here's what I'm doing about it. In terms of finding these people, I really look for folks who have values alignment with my own personal values. And I think it gets back a little bit to taking risk. Usually the risk doesn't, well, at least in my mind, the risk doesn't necessarily start from taking a leap off the deep end, into the water off the deep end or out of the airplane. It's really about building the parachute on the way down, that you leave a stable environment, or you're leaping out of an airplane and building a contraption so you don't hurt yourself or other people. The same with mentoring. It's less scary taking that chance and asking someone to be a mentor. It's actually harder to maintain a relationship. It's not convenient for anyone. So the question is, how do you make people feel like they're contributing meaningfully to you and the world by spending a little bit of time in ways that matter, not just for you, but for them as well?
Great. And you mentioned that when you started doing this, you found that you could make a big difference in places like Haiti and Tanzania and even in Anacostia and DC. How do you decide where you want to kind of focus your social investment? Is it based on where the applicants kind of say that they want to focus their efforts, or do you have an agenda?
We've made a really conscious decision to focus roughly 50% of our work domestically, anywhere across the US, and the other 50% internationally, anywhere across the world. And our rationale for that activity is that we know we have our own problems in America. And it's often very easy to look and point and try to tackle someone else's issues. But we all know that we have plenty of problems in the US that require focus and attention. And we're dedicated to addressing those issues domestically in addition to internationally.
Great. And I understand you guys are accepting applications now. Is that right?
Yeah, so please check us out. On our website is globalgoodfund.org, and we have 2 fellowship programs right now that are available. And we're definitely looking for applicants, so we'd love to hear from you.
Great. And how long is the application period open so everyone knows?
Sure. So please apply before June 30th to be considered for a year-long fellowship program that starts in January 2018.
Great. So looking a little more broadly, when you look at social entrepreneurship, what do you see now and in the future?
One of the challenges with social entrepreneurship domestically to start is that it's actually entrepreneurship in general has been something that you have to be able to take a risk financially and have the stability to start something. And so I find a lot of entrepreneurs coming from privileged backgrounds where they didn't question whether they were going to school. It was which school they were going to in terms of a university, or whether they were going to eat dinner. It was what was for dinner. Came from very stable households, or at least households that could provide a sense of stability for them moving forward. So I think in the future, one of the things I'm most excited about is Global Good Fund's role in helping to turn that on its head and continue to support the best social entrepreneurs, regardless of what their background is. And we're definitely seeing more diversity from all standpoints, religiously, gender-wise. Over half of our entrepreneurs are women, which is really exciting because that's not the case in terms of entrepreneurship domestically. Mm-hmm. Internationally, we're seeing more development in social enterprise in places regionally like Africa or the Middle East, parts of China. There's definitely a rise in social entrepreneurship as a concept and an industry that didn't exist even 10 years ago.
Interesting. And then how do you choose who you accept into your program? Like, what are the types of things that you're looking for? I know you get a lot of applications.
Sure. So we have a pretty in-depth filtering process. So we use technology to source to filter the fellowship candidates in the first place. And then we have an interview process, video process. So we're looking for a variety of things. The first thing is we want someone who's full-time committed to their enterprise, is generally under 40 for the traditional Global Good Fund Fellowship program. Although we now have an application opportunity called the Diana Davis Spencer Fellowship that's available for entrepreneurs over 50. And these are programs that are targeted at people who have already started social enterprises that are committed to growing, that could benefit from leadership development of the social entrepreneur, him or herself. From a characteristic standpoint, we're looking for someone who has enough ego strength to be resilient in the face of adversity and is simultaneously humble and is coachable, is willing to take feedback about what he or she can do to improve personally so that their business will grow.
Great. And then what do the people in your program get in return specifically? I know they get a lot of leadership development, but are they paired with like a team or a specific mentor? How does that work?
Sure. So it's a year-long program where the first step is a leadership assessment. So that's a 360 leadership assessment that gives a panoramic view of the leadership of the individual at a given point in time. So that's a self-reflective activity, as well as the entrepreneur nominates other folks to evaluate their personal leadership. Once we get those results, they're interpreted by what we call a leadership development coach. Each fellow gets a leadership development coach one-on-one to interpret the results of their 360 leadership assessment, and then craft a personalized leadership plan with the idea that, yes, we know you need to fundraise, or yes, we know you need to hire staff or do new business development activities. What does that mean you personally need to do to take your company to the next level? So that we help through a leadership development coach, each entrepreneur set quarterly goals that's part of a leadership development plan based on the data from the 360 mirror or leadership assessment. That takes about 3 months from a process standpoint. At the end of 3 months, we host a 4-day event in Washington, D.C. that's focused on leadership development training and networking with peer leadership. This is the only part of the Global Good Fund that's in person. So the rest of the fellowship is virtual. And the idea there is that we really want to invest in people where they're having the biggest impact in their local communities, which is on the ground. So the Global Good Fund Summit is a 4-day event in the Washington, D.C. area where we bring together all the entrepreneurs as well as their leadership development coaches. And during that time, we also introduce in person executive business mentors. And these folks are running $40 million to $60 billion companies. They have relatively little time, as you might imagine. They tend to be high net worth individuals, and they could be doing anything they choose with their time or money, and they're choosing to gift it to the Global Good Fund Fellows. So it's a really phenomenal mentoring opportunity for each of the entrepreneurs, where the purpose over the next duration of the next year is to implement the leadership development plan. And Global Good Fund provides between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on the fellowship program, to implement the leadership development plan for each entrepreneur.
That's great. I'm kind of like salivating listening to this because I would love the opportunity, as I'm sure many other entrepreneurs would, to have all of that coaching and to work with executive business mentors. I think that's just such a tremendous opportunity. And you talked about how there are these executive business mentors who don't have a lot of time. What's your business model for how you kind of work with the people that coach and mentor the folks in your program? Are they mostly volunteers or some of them part of your paid team?
So we have about 20 leadership development coaches who work with the Global Good Fund on a part-time contracted basis. And these folks are volunteers with our Global Good Fund fellows. And then for the leadership development services that we sell to other fellowship programs or companies, they provide those, the leadership development coaches provide those services on a significantly reduced cost structure through the Global Good Fund as a means of doing purposeful work with clients who they wouldn't normally get. So they're used to working with Fortune 500 companies, and now they're working with social entrepreneurs. From the business executive standpoint, our philosophy there in terms of recruitment has really been that it takes one to know one, similar to the fellows, the social entrepreneurs. So the idea is once you get a small group of people who reflect the values, the humility, and the business accomplishments of the executive mentors we're striving to include in our community, they actually help source other executive business leaders who are interested in mentoring emerging social entrepreneurs. We provide usually between 2 and 4 options per fellow for executive mentors so that fellows have a choice in terms of what's the best fit. And there's an executive who ran a multi-billion company who manages this executive network. So it's really a peer model.
That's great. It sounds like you've done a tremendous job over the last 5 years building this really robust program and network. I want to hear from you what are 3 tactics that you use to grow the business and the organization to this extent?
Well, I think like any entrepreneur, everyone on the team is very proactive and we hustle. We're hungry to make a difference, and that comes through hard work. And you all know that. So that's one of the 3 tactics. It's just pretty basic. We breathe Global Good Fund, and we're thinking about all the time how we can connect with people who want to make a difference and use their business skills, translate their business skills into social significance. So we're hustling all the time, and we're hungry to make a meaningful difference in the world through the Global Good Fund. The second piece is we provide a platform that's structured for both emerging entrepreneurs and executives to make a difference. So one of the ways we've iterated our model is we provided an increasing amount of structure over time. We actually started with fewer structural elements to the fellowship program at the outset, thinking that these are very aggressive, generally speaking, people who know what they want and they are aggressive about getting it. But we found that folks, both the entrepreneurs and the business executives, wanted more structure. So we have provided an increasing amount of structure for the fellowship program itself, and we maintain the fellowship program at the core and flagship of everything we do at the Global Good Fund. I think the third tactic is we've really focused on expanding revenue generation opportunities to sustain the organization. Global Good Fund is a nonprofit organization, so we do gladly accept donations. And we've also since the beginning, wanted to be self-sustaining. So our vision is that by 2020, we would be able to cover 50% of our operating costs through earned revenue. Back in 2015, we started that effort. And as of last year, we were covering 50% of our operating costs through earned income. So we're tracking against the plan. And what that means is we actually now sell fellowship replication opportunities to family foundations and corporations that want to pursue a specific cause, industry, or geography. And Global Good Fund will source those entrepreneurs and run fellowship programs on behalf of the company or family foundation in their name. So that's a way that the Global Good Fund has grown our business through revenue generation activity while staying very true to our mission.
That is so smart. I do a lot of work with nonprofits, particularly who are looking for other revenue generating activities besides donations. And a lot of them sometimes can't get out of their own way. And I think a lot of nonprofits are in an excellent position to kind of replicate their model for other people that want to do the same things, but maybe don't have the infrastructure in place that you do. So that fellowship replication opportunity is so smart. And that's the type of thing that a lot of nonprofits can do because they have their own set of expertise in something. And a lot of times I don't think they realize how much value there is in that and the processes that they've set up. I love what you've done there. So it sounds like you've learned a tremendous amount. You've obviously done really well for yourself, particularly at such a young age. You had a boss that was willing to mentor you and invest in you. And then you set up this nonprofit and have just done such amazing things with it. But there must have been some time where you've stagnated or felt some challenges. Can you talk a little bit about that and then how you got yourself back on track?
Sure. Well, we fail all the time. I actually keep a running list of our failures throughout the year. And then around Thanksgiving, I send a personal letter to our community explaining my top 3 failures of the year and thanking the community for sticking with us throughout the Global Good Fund's existence. So we make failures all the time. I'm not necessarily sure I call it stagnating because that's part of growing is failing. And one of our philosophies that was introduced to Global Good Fund by the executive mentor community was that you don't have to wait for things to be perfect to give it a shot. And so we try things that don't work. We've tried different revenue opportunities that don't work. We have hired people and it hasn't worked out. We have tried different social media tactics that don't work as well as they could have. And so we're constantly learning and failing and iterating the Global Good Fund model and just trying to get better. So I think we don't apologize for failing. We just admit that we fail often. And it's part of growing. And we also take risks. So I think the benefit of having the board that we do is it's a really incredible board is that they're extremely supportive of taking risks from a business standpoint. And they have a strong belief in the staff of the organization to fail and to pick ourselves back up and be resilient and keep going.
Yeah, the transparency that you talked about there, with not only documenting the failures, but actually sending them out and letting people know what they are, that's pretty amazing. I applaud you for that. So it sounds like you've got a lot going on. You're obviously very driven, but how do you find time to take care of yourself while you're running this really successful and important organization that's doing a lot of great things for other people?
The things that I like to do as hobbies are kayaking. So I'm a big fan of kayaking and just being outside in general. So I try to make excuses that I need them necessarily, but I really like being outside. So any excuse I can find to eat outside or walk outside or do an activity outside, I take advantage of that. I try to create a culture at the Global Good Fund where we're supportive of people's lives. And so I'm really proud to say that we've hired 3 women who are returning to work after focusing on their families and making sure that we're creating a culture where people can scale up as they want to. And all 3 of these employees have chosen to do that. I should add in, I have an infant son and am due in just a few weeks with our second child, a girl this time. So there's a lot of activity for me is less about balance. And as a friend of mine said, just staying on the tightrope. So sometimes I lean a little bit to the right and sometimes I lean to the left, and sometimes I'm walking backwards to make sure I stay on that tightrope, but I stay on. And I'm really grateful for having a supportive village of people who not only take care of me, but also the Global Good Fund and my family.
Great. That's a great way to put it, just trying to stay on the tightrope. So let's go ahead and just close with a parting piece of guidance for us. I know you've already given us so many great nuggets to think about, but I want to get one more.
So for me, a parting piece of wisdom, if I can offer any, is that sometimes opportunity looks like hard work. The way I met my boss was by mopping floors, pushing snack carts, folding laundry, and taking attendance at a meeting. And had I not been willing to put in that kind of low-level work, I never would have met the person who eventually became the co-founder of the Global Good Fund. So sometimes major opportunities look like hard work.
Yeah, that's true. I think that sometimes people are waiting to be noticed for their work, even if it's not the type of hard work that you're talking about, even if it's like within their job description, or they're waiting for a stroke of luck. And sometimes that's not what it is. It's the ability to be humble and to do things just because the job needs to get done, and to put yourself in front of the people that you ultimately want to make an impact on and an impression on. So I totally agree with that. Opportunity sometimes looks like hard work. So I hope today's episode inspires you to think more about how you can find your passion and live your best life. For more information, including links to resources that Carrie and I chatted about today and how best to get in touch with her, head on over to our website, theboostpodcast.com, and check out our show notes from this episode and catch the Boost bonus. Carrie, I want to thank you for sharing your journey with us today. And remember, anything is possible for you.
Now that you've completed this episode, the next step is to join the Boost Squad for strategic insights, tips, and tricks, as well as exclusive resources designed specifically to accelerate your personal and professional growth. All this and more is waiting for you at theboostpodcast.com.